The morning sun filtered through the ancient stained glass windows of Whitmore Palace as Kate Matthews pushed her cleaning cart down the endless marble corridor. She had worked as a housekeeping staff member for 3 years, her days filled with dusting priceless artifacts and polishing floors that had witnessed centuries of history. The palace, home to the Duke and Duchess of Whitmore, employed over 200 staff members, but Kate had always felt invisible among them. She preferred it that way. Her quiet nature and dedication to her work meant she could move through the grand rooms unnoticed, a ghost among the gilt frames and velvet curtains. That particular Tuesday began like any other. Kate arrived at 6 in the morning, changed into her uniform, and collected her supplies. The East Wing was her responsibility that week, a section of the palace rarely visited by the family, but filled with guest rooms that needed regular maintenance. As she made her way through the third-floor hallway, she noticed something unusual. A painting hung slightly askew on the wall, its heavy golden frame tilted just enough to catch her trained eye. The painting depicted the third Duke of Whitmore, a stern-faced man who had lived 200 years ago. Kate had dusted this portrait hundreds of times, always careful not to disturb its position. She reached up to straighten it, placing her hands on either side of the ornate frame. As she adjusted it, she heard a soft click behind the canvas. The sound was so faint she might have missed it if the corridor hadn't been completely silent. Curiosity overtook her usual caution. Kate gently pulled the painting away from the wall and discovered a small brass panel hidden behind it. The panel contained a keyhole unlike any she had seen in the palace. It was shaped like a star, with intricate engravings surrounding it. Her heart began to race as she realized she had stumbled upon something that had likely remained hidden for decades, perhaps centuries. Kate glanced down the hallway in both directions. The morning shift had just begun, and most staff members were busy in other wings of the palace. She knew she should report her discovery to Mrs. Henderson, the head of housekeeping, but something held her back. The palace held many secrets, and staff members were explicitly told not to pry into the family's private matters. Yet this felt different. This wasn't a private letter left on a desk or an overheard conversation. This was something deliberately hidden, something that time had forgotten. She carefully returned the painting to its original position and continued with her duties, but her mind kept returning to the hidden panel. Throughout the day, she found herself distracted, making small mistakes that were unlike her. She forgot to replace the fresh towels in the blue room and nearly knocked over a Ming vase while dusting the library. The secret keyhole consumed her thoughts. As her shift ended, Kate made a decision that would change everything. Instead of heading home, she ventured into the oldest part of the palace, the section that housed the archives. The archive room was typically off-limits to cleaning staff, but Kate had befriended Thomas, the elderly archivist who spent his days cataloging the palace's vast collection of historical documents. Thomas had taken a liking to Kate, often sharing stories about the palace's history during their brief encounters in the hallways. She found Thomas bent over a leather-bound ledger, his reading glasses perched precariously on his nose. When she explained what she had discovered, his eyes lit up with an excitement she had never seen before. He led her to a corner of the archive room, where ancient blueprints and architectural drawings were stored. Together, they searched through yellowed papers and faded ink until Thomas suddenly stopped, his finger pointing to a detailed drawing of the palace's east wing. The drawing, dated 1823, showed the exact location where Kate had found the hidden panel. But, more importantly, it included a notation in spidery handwriting that mentioned a stellar key and referenced a scandal involving the third Duke's wife, Lady Margaret. Thomas explained that Lady Margaret had mysteriously disappeared in 1824, and her fate had become one of the palace's enduring mysteries. Some said she had run away with a lover. Others claimed she had been murdered, but no evidence had ever been found to support either theory. The archivist revealed something that made Kate's blood run cold. 3 months ago, during renovation work in the palace's wine cellar, workers had discovered a small brass key with a star-shaped head. The key had been deemed historically insignificant and placed in a box of miscellaneous artifacts in the archive room. Thomas retrieved the box and handed Kate the key. It was heavy in her palm, its brass surface tarnished with age, but the star shape still perfectly defined. Kate knew she was standing at a crossroads. She could return the key to the box, report her discovery to her supervisors, and continue her quiet life as a palace cleaner. Or she could pursue the mystery, potentially uncovering secrets that had been buried for 2 centuries. The weight of the decision pressed upon her as heavily as the brass key in her hand. That night, Kate barely slept. She lived in a small flat a few miles from the palace, a modest but comfortable space she had called home for the past 5 years. The key sat on her bedside table, seeming to glow in the moonlight that filtered through her curtains. She thought about Lady Margaret, wondering what secrets had been important enough to hide behind such an elaborate mechanism. By morning, her decision was made. Kate arrived at work early, before the first rays of sunlight touched the palace walls. She had hidden the key in her uniform pocket, its weight a constant reminder of what she was about to do. She went through her normal routine, collecting her supplies and making her way to the East Wing. But this time, she had timed her arrival carefully. The security guards changed shifts at 6:45 a.m., leaving a brief window when the corridors were empty. Standing before the portrait of the third Duke, Kate's hands trembled as she moved the painting aside. The hidden panel seemed to mock her with its silence. She pulled the star-shaped key from her pocket and inserted it into the keyhole. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a series of mechanical clicks that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet corridor, a section of the wall swung inward. Behind the hidden door was a narrow staircase leading downward into darkness. Kate had brought a small flashlight, knowing the palace's older sections often had poor lighting. The beam of light revealed stone steps covered in a thick layer of dust. No one had walked down these stairs in a very long time. Taking a deep breath, Kate stepped through the doorway. The staircase spiraled downward for what felt like an eternity. Kate counted 37 steps before she reached a small chamber. The air was thick with dust and age, making her cough as she swept her flashlight around the room. What she saw made her gasp. The chamber was furnished like a small study, with a desk, chair, and bookshelf all covered in cobwebs. But it was what lay on the desk that captured her attention. A leather journal sat open, its pages yellow but still readable. Beside it were several letters tied with a faded ribbon and what appeared to be legal documents. Kate approached slowly, afraid that any sudden movement might cause the ancient papers to crumble. She began to read the journal, and, as she did, the truth about Lady Margaret's disappearance began to unfold. The journal belonged to Lady Margaret herself. In elegant handwriting, she detailed a shocking discovery she had made about her husband, the third Duke. He had been involved in a smuggling operation, using the palace's position and his influence to move stolen artifacts from Egypt and Greece into private collections across Europe. Lady Margaret had found evidence of his crimes and confronted him, threatening to expose the truth to the authorities. The letters beside the journal were from Lady Margaret to her sister, never sent, describing her fear for her life. The Duke had threatened her, telling her that if she revealed his secrets, she would disappear, and no one would ever question the word of a Duke over that of a missing woman. The legal documents were even more damning. They showed transactions, shipping manifests, and correspondence with known criminals of the era. Kate's flashlight beam caught something else in the corner of the room. A small trunk sat against the wall, its lock long since rusted away. Inside, she found Lady Margaret's personal effects, jewelry, letters from her family, and, most heartbreakingly, a half-finished letter to her young son, expressing her love and hope that he would someday learn the truth about his father. The implications of what Kate had discovered were staggering. This wasn't just a historical curiosity. The current Duke and Duchess of Whitmore were direct descendants of the third Duke. The family's wealth and status had been built, at least in part, on criminal activities. The palace itself might contain countless artifacts that had been stolen from their rightful homes. Kate carefully photographed each document with her phone, knowing she needed evidence of what she had found. She then faced another difficult decision. Should she return everything to its hiding place and pretend she had never found it? Should she take the documents to the authorities? Or should she confront the current Duke and Duchess with the truth about their ancestor? As she climbed back up the narrow staircase, Kate's mind raced with possibilities. She carefully closed the hidden door and returned the painting to its place. The star-shaped key felt even heavier in her pocket now that she knew the weight of the secrets it unlocked. She finished her shift in a daze, her movements mechanical as she cleaned and dusted, all while carrying the burden of knowledge that could destroy one of Britain's most respected noble families. That evening, Kate met with Thomas in a small cafe far from the palace. She showed him the photographs on her phone, watching as his face grew pale with each revelation. The old archivist, who had dedicated his life to preserving the palace's history, was torn between his loyalty to the institution and his commitment to historical truth. They talked for hours, weighing the consequences of revealing what Kate had found. Thomas revealed that he had suspected something like this might exist. Over his years in the archives, he had noticed gaps in the records, documents that should have existed but didn't, and references to items that had mysteriously disappeared from the historical record. He had always assumed these were simply lost to time, but now he wondered if they had been deliberately hidden or destroyed. The next few days were torture for Kate. She went about her duties, cleaning the same rooms, polishing the same surfaces, but everything felt different. When she looked at the portraits of past dukes and duchesses, she wondered what other secrets they were hiding. When she saw the current duke in a hallway, she noticed a resemblance to the third duke that she had never seen before, the same cold eyes and stern mouth. On the fourth day after her discovery, something unexpected happened. Kate was summoned to the office of Mr. Pemberton, the palace's head butler. This was highly unusual. In her 3 years of employment, she had never been called to his office. As she walked through the palace's administrative wing, her heart pounded with fear. Had someone seen her enter the hidden chamber? Had the security cameras she thought were inactive actually recorded her movements? Mr. Pemberton sat behind his imposing desk, his face unreadable. But he wasn't alone. Sitting in one of the leather chairs was a woman Kate didn't recognize. She was elderly but elegant, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see straight through Kate. Mr. Pemberton introduced her as Lady Catherine Whitmore Ashford, the Duke's elderly aunt and the family's unofficial historian. Lady Catherine spoke in a voice that was soft but commanded attention. She explained that she had been watching Kate for some time. The painting in the East Wing had been deliberately left askew as a test. Several members of the staff had noticed it over the years, but only Kate had discovered what lay behind it. Lady Catherine revealed that she knew about the hidden chamber and its contents. She had discovered it herself 50 years ago, but had chosen to keep the secret. Kate listened in stunned silence as Lady Catherine explained her reasoning. The current Duke and Duchess were good people who used their wealth and influence for charitable causes. They supported hospitals, schools, and cultural institutions across the country. Revealing the crimes of their ancestor would not only destroy them personally, but would also end the good work they did. The sins of the past, she argued, should not be visited upon the innocent descendants. But Lady Catherine had been waiting for someone like Kate, someone trustworthy who could be brought into the secret. She proposed a compromise. The hidden documents would be preserved and eventually donated to a historical institution, but not for 50 years. In the meantime, Kate would be promoted to a new position as assistant archivist, working with Thomas to properly catalog and preserve the palace's historical documents, including those in the hidden chamber. Kate was torn. Part of her felt this was a cover-up, a way to continue hiding the truth. But another part understood Lady Catherine's position. The current Duke and Duchess had not committed these crimes. They were as much victims of their ancestors' legacy as anyone, and the good they did in the present might outweigh the sins of the past. She asked for time to consider the offer. That night, Kate walked through the city streets for hours, wrestling with her conscience. She thought about justice and truth about the artifacts that had been stolen and the cultures they had been taken from. She thought about Lady Margaret, whose story had been erased from history. But she also thought about the children's hospital wing funded by the Duchess and the scholarship program the Duke had established for underprivileged students. When Kate returned to the palace the next day, she had made her decision. She accepted Lady Catherine's offer, but with conditions. The stolen artifacts identified in the documents would be quietly returned to their countries of origin. The palace would increase its charitable giving, specifically to museums and cultural institutions in Egypt and Greece. And Lady Margaret's story would be told, not as a scandal, but as a tragedy, through a carefully constructed historical narrative that would emerge over time. Lady Catherine agreed to these terms, seemingly impressed by Kate's negotiation. Over the following months, Kate transitioned into her new role. She worked closely with Thomas, learning the intricacies of archival preservation. Together, they carefully documented every item in the hidden chamber, creating a complete record that would someday tell the full story. The process of returning the stolen artifacts was delicate and complex. Items that had been displayed in the palace for generations were quietly removed, officially for restoration or loaned to other institutions. In reality, they were being returned to museums in Cairo, Athens, and other cities. The palace's lawyers worked behind the scenes to ensure the transfers were legal and couldn't be traced back to an admission of historical wrongdoing. Kate found herself in a unique position. She attended meetings with the Duke and Duchess, who treated her with a mixture of respect and wariness. They knew she held their family's darkest secret, but they also recognized her discretion and integrity. The Duchess, in particular, seemed relieved that the truth was finally being addressed, even if privately. She confided in Kate that she had always felt uneasy about some of the palace's collections, sensing that something wasn't right about their provenance. As the months turned into a year, Kate discovered more hidden compartments and secret documents throughout the palace. It became clear that the third Duke's crimes were just one of many secrets the palace walls contained. Each discovery required careful consideration of how to balance historical truth with present-day consequences. Kate became skilled at this delicate dance, earning the trust of both the family and the staff. The most significant change came when Kate suggested creating a permanent exhibition about Lady Margaret. Working with Lady Catherine and a team of historians, they crafted a narrative that honored Lady Margaret's memory without explicitly detailing her husband's crimes. The exhibition, housed in a renovated section of the palace, told the story of a woman ahead of her time, interested in archaeology and cultural preservation. Visitors learned about her mysterious disappearance, but were left to draw their own conclusions about the circumstances. Thomas, who had feared he would die without seeing the palace's secrets revealed, found new purpose in his work with Kate. Together, they created a comprehensive archive that would serve future historians while protecting the innocent. He often told Kate that she had given him the greatest gift an archivist could receive, the chance to preserve the whole truth, even if it couldn't be immediately shared. The star-shaped key became a symbol of transformation for Kate. She kept in her desk drawer a reminder of how a single moment of curiosity had changed not just her life, but the lives of everyone connected to the palace. She had gone from being invisible to being one of the most important people in the palace's hierarchy, trusted with secrets that spanned centuries. One evening, as Kate worked late in the archive room, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The palace, which had once seemed like an unchanging monument to the past, now felt alive with possibility. Every portrait, every artifact, every stone had a story to tell, and she was the guardian of those stories. The Duke surprised her that evening by visiting the archive room. It was the first time they had been alone together since she had accepted her new position. He stood quietly for a moment, then spoke about the burden of inherited legacy. He thanked Kate for her discretion and her wisdom in handling the discovery. He revealed that learning about his ancestors' crimes had prompted him to examine his own life and responsibilities more carefully. The palace's charitable work had increased threefold since Kate's discovery. though the public would never know the true reason why. As her second year in the position began, Kate received an unexpected letter. It was from a museum curator in Cairo, thanking the palace for the generous donation of several artifacts. The curator mentioned how these pieces filled crucial gaps in their collection, allowing them to tell a more complete story of their cultural heritage. Kate smiled as she filed the letter away, knowing that Lady Margaret would have approved. The relationship between Kate and the Whitmore family evolved into something unique. She was neither servant nor family, but something in between, a keeper of secrets, a guardian of truth, and a bridge between past and future. Lady Catherine, now in her 80s, began sharing more family secrets with Kate, ensuring that nothing would be lost when she passed away. Kate established a private tradition. Every year, on the anniversary of her discovery, she would descend the hidden staircase to Lady Margaret's chamber. She would light a candle and spend an hour reading from Lady Margaret's journal, keeping her memory alive. She had added her own journal to the collection, documenting the journey from discovery to resolution, ensuring future generations would understand not just what had been hidden, but why and how it had been revealed. The palace staff noticed changes in Kate, but couldn't quite understand them. She moved with new confidence, spoke with authority on historical matters, and was consulted by the family on issues that seemed far above her original station. Some resented her elevation, but most recognized that she had earned her position through merit and discretion. Mrs. Henderson, the head of housekeeping who had once been Kate's supervisor, now treated her as an equal, understanding that Kate's role transcended traditional palace hierarchy. As Kate's work continued, she uncovered evidence that Lady Margaret had not been the third Duke's only victim. Documents suggested that several servants who had discovered his activities had met suspicious ends. These darker revelations required even more delicate handling. Kate worked with Lady Catherine to establish a memorial fund for the descendants of palace servants, ostensibly to honor their service, but actually as a form of restitution for historical wrongs. The palace began to change in subtle ways. Plaques appeared next to certain artifacts, acknowledging their cultural origins. The tour guide scripts were updated to include more diverse perspectives on the palace's history. The gift shop began selling books about archaeological ethics and cultural preservation. These changes were so gradual that visitors barely noticed, but they represented a fundamental shift in how the palace presented itself to the world. Kate's personal life transformed as well. Her new position came with a substantial salary increase, allowing her to move to a larger flat closer to the palace. But more importantly, she had found her purpose. She enrolled in evening courses in history and archival science, formalizing the knowledge she had gained through experience. Professors were amazed by her insights into historical preservation and ethical considerations in archival work. One day, while cataloging documents in a previously unexplored section of the archives, Kate found something that made her heart stop. It was a letter from Lady Margaret's son, written years after her disappearance. In it, he expressed his belief that his mother had not abandoned him, but had been silenced for trying to do what was right. He wrote of his determination to honor her memory by being a better man than his father. Kate realized this son had been the fourth Duke, who history remembered as a reformer and philanthropist. Lady Margaret's sacrifice had not been in vain. Kate brought this letter to the Duke, watching as he read his ancestors' words with tears in his eyes. It was a moment of connection across the centuries, a son's love for his mother reaching forward to touch another generation. The Duke decided to make this letter the centerpiece of the Lady Margaret exhibition, finally giving her story the ending it deserved. As Kate's third year in her new role began, she received an invitation that surprised her. An international conference on museum ethics and cultural repatriation wanted her to speak about the palace's recent initiatives. Without revealing the specific circumstances, she could share the model they had developed for addressing historical wrongs while preserving institutional stability. Kate accepted, realizing her experience could help other institutions facing similar dilemmas. The conference was a success. Kate spoke eloquently about the balance between truth and reconciliation, between justice and mercy. She never mentioned the star-shaped key or the hidden chamber, but her passion for ethical preservation inspired others to examine their own institutions more closely. She returned to the palace with new connections and ideas for furthering their mission. Lady Catherine passed away that winter, but not before ensuring Kate was legally recognized as the official keeper of the palace archives. In her will, she left Kate a personal letter thanking her for bringing light to the shadows and trusting her to continue the work. She also left her a small box containing another brass key, this one heart-shaped, with a note saying only, "When you're ready." Kate knew there were more secrets waiting to be discovered, more truths waiting to be revealed. The heart-shaped key sat next to the star-shaped one in her desk drawer, a promise of future revelations. But she had learned patience. Some secrets needed time to breathe before they could be safely exposed to the light. The palace continued to evolve under Kate's careful guidance. The Duke and Duchess, initially wary of her knowledge, had come to rely on her judgment. They consulted her on matters beyond the archives, recognizing her unique perspective on the intersection of past and present. When they decided to open new sections of the palace to the public, Kate helped craft narratives that were both truthful and sensitive to the complex history. 5 years after her initial discovery, Kate stood in the East Wing corridor where it had all begun. The portrait of the third Duke still hung in its place, but it no longer held secrets. The hidden chamber had been properly preserved and would eventually be part of a special tour for historians and researchers. Lady Margaret's story was now known, if not in its entirety, then at least in spirit. Kate had transformed from a cleaner who preferred invisibility to a respected authority on palace history. She had published articles in academic journals, advised other historic houses on ethical preservation, and most importantly, had ensured that the voices silenced by history could finally be heard. The star-shaped key had unlocked more than a hidden door. It had opened a path to redemption for an entire institution. The palace staff had grown accustomed to Kate's unique position. New employees were told simply that she was the keeper of special collections, a role that explained her influence without revealing the depths of what she knew. She trained assistants carefully, looking for the same qualities of discretion and integrity that had served her well. The work of documenting and reconciling the palace's past would take generations, and Kate was building a foundation for those who would come after. As she walked through the palace galleries, Kate often thought about the journey that had brought her here. A simple act of straightening a crooked painting had led to discoveries that changed lives and restored justice across centuries. She had learned that truth was not always simple, that sometimes it needed to be carefully managed to prevent causing more harm than good. But she had also learned that secrets, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of finding the light. The star-shaped key remained her most treasured possession, not for what it opened, but for what it represented. It was a reminder that ordinary people could uncover extraordinary truths, that courage could come from unexpected places, and that the past, no matter how carefully hidden, would always find a way to speak to those willing to listen. Kate had become that listener, the guardian of stories that needed to be told, the keeper of keys that unlocked not just doors, but possibilities for healing and redemption. In the end, Kate's discovery had not shattered the palace walls as dramatically as one might expect. Instead, it had transformed them from barriers that hid shameful secrets into bridges that connected past mistakes with future possibilities. The palace remained standing, but it stood for something different now. It was no longer just a monument to power and privilege, but a testament to the possibility of change, reconciliation, and the enduring power of truth, carefully and compassionately revealed.